The 49ers got a game this weekend. They're playing the Las Vegas Raiders on New Year's Day. I'm here with Jack. We're giving you the latest news and updates on the team, as well as some evaluations on certain players' performances. Stay tuned.
Let's go get him. Let's go get him today, man. Let's go. Hey, dominate on three. 1, 2, 3. Dominate.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another Friday show. I'm here with Jack Hammer, obviously one of the better beat writers in the Bay Area. Jack, how are you doing, my man?
I'm good. How are you doing, Ron?
Doing good. Excited to talk to you. It's been a minute, and so glad to obviously chop shop with you once again.
Yeah, no, it's been a couple of weeks, so looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And before we start, one of the guys always in here, Raphael 5629ers, got to give a shout out to you. Thank you so much for tuning in on this fine Friday afternoon. But Jack, you're the one who's always on top of it. You're the one who gets to hear some of the injury news really quick. 49ers injury report came out. Deebo Samuel will not play this weekend. Was that expected for you? Kind of give me your thought process on that.
Yeah, there was nothing that was unexpected this week on the injury report, really, and especially when you look at the guys who aren't going to be playing. You know, Garoppolo, Givens, and Samuel. I didn't expect to see any of those three out there. So nothing bad there. The 49ers are getting really healthy at the right time, it looks like. And I would expect to see Deebo Samuel back on the practice field on Wednesday when they start to get ready for the game against Arizona. And I think he's going to be playing against Arizona. I don't know about, playing the full game, but he's going to get some snaps in that game, I think.
Yeah, I think so too. I think it was expected Deebo Samuel would not play this weekend. Deebo Samuel obviously coming back from the injury. You don't necessarily want to rush it. If he's 100%, you play 100% players. But you don't know if he's 100% yet. Didn't seem like that was necessarily the case despite him coming back to practice. Him coming back to practice was actually a good sign, though, this week. It shows that he is on progress or on track to return, be it next week or the playoffs. Now, with Samuel likely to return now soon, would you like him to get some reps in week 18, get that rust off before the playoffs, or do you think the smarter decision would be to sit him and then play him week 1 of the playoffs?
No, I'd rather see him get out there. If he's good to go, get him out there, let him play a few snaps against the Cardinals, kind of get into the flow of the game a little bit. I think that would be the best thing for him. I was surprised on Wednesday when I was there. That was the day that he was supposed to be doing his workout on the side. We were able to see that occurring. Usually they do that away from us, but we were able to see him out there. And, after watching the way that he was taken off the field in that Buccaneers game, to see the way that he was moving on the field on Wednesday was really something. And so I think if they really wanted to, if they were in a position where they had to win this game, he could even have played this week if they really needed him to. So I think, they're taking it smart with him and get him in there, let him get some reps and get ready for it. And who knows where this thing goes. Maybe Philadelphia loses a couple of games in a row here, and the 49ers are going to have a week off anyway.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that's the smarter move. Get him out there with Arizona. It's a low risk game. Get him out there. Get that rust a little knocked off so that he can get back to the physicality and the level of play that he normally gets, or the normal physicality that he normally gets to during game days. That would be helpful if he can get out there next week. And so, without Deebo Samuel, like you said, no Kevin Givens, no Jimmy Garoppolo, all three players expected to be out this week. Given seems like he's going to be back for the playoffs. Looking at some of the guys who were limited, Christian McCaffrey, once again, limited one day with that knee injury, played limited, I think, Thursday, and then full today. Is that, do you think, something that's just going to be recurring for the remainder of the year, that knee irritation in a way that they continue to put on the injury report, or do you think that's just as a precaution?
Yeah, that's going to be the way that they're going to handle it for going forward. They're 2 days of practice plus the walkthrough on Saturday. That's enough for these guys to get ready to go. So I think they're fine. It's a good process that they're going through.
Yeah. I see a nice question here from Raphael 5629ers. Now, last 2 weeks we've seen some Kittle breakout games. Deebo Samuel obviously not been out there. Seattle was a bit of a tougher game for the receivers, and Kittle, we've seen be the highest targeted receiver 2 weeks in a row, the guy with the most production, 2 touchdowns in 2 straight games. Now, I don't know if he'll get 2 touchdowns in this game, but talk to me about George Kittle. What have you kind of seen from him the last 2 weeks? Do you think that it's been anything different? What's kind of led to this spark?
Well, I just think that he's finally healthy. I think he's been, he dealt with some injuries early on. He started coming back, and you know, he's had a couple of really good games in a row. It's not the first time we've seen him do this, though. We saw Kittle have a really good game out in Mexico City with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback. I think he put up, what did he have, 2 touchdowns in that game? It was a pretty good effort overall. So I don't really think I've seen anything all that different from George Kittle over these last couple of weeks. It's just the ball in direction, and typical good things happen, and it usually, and so we're seeing that over these last, it's just the fact that it's happened 2 games in a row. But again, it's not anything new. He had back-to-back games of 83 and 98 yards in week 6 and 7, Atlanta and Kansas City, and he had 4 for 84. Like I said, in Mexico City with a couple of touchdowns there as well. So it's all good news, and to see him do it back-to-back is really positive. And I think there's a really good chance that we're going to see him, I don't know about 2 touchdowns, but I wouldn't put it off the board considering the injury and from, what's going on the injury side for the Raiders, losing Chandler Jones, who their top pass rusher, their second best pass rusher, excuse me, and then also losing their linebacker, one of their linebackers, their leading tackler, in missing his name right now, and Denzel Perryman.
Perryman, yeah.
Yeah, he's their leading tackler at linebacker, and he's not going to be out there either. So that, I think, should help out George Kittle towards possibly getting the 2 touchdowns again.
I think so too. I think Kittle, I don't know if he'll get the 2 touchdowns. I don't know if that level of production will be there. But Kittle has, like you said, been impactful for the last few weeks. And it's not, he's had these couple of game stretches where he's kind of been that focal point. He's been able to get open. And I think a big part of it is Christian McCaffrey in a way. McCaffrey has opened up this offense on so many levels. I know we've talked about it before, but with Kittle itself, when you have these routes where McCaffrey and Kittle end up on the same side of the field, and there's so much attention towards McCaffrey, provides a favorable matchup for Kittle. Kittle being able to work the way he does after the catch with his unique level or his unique traits for a tight end, him being able to do that, and also without Deebo Samuel, you look for a bigger safety blanket. Samuel this year has operated more as a safety blanket than a receiver. His average depth of target has been lower than you'd expect. It seems like he's kind of operating more in the shorter range of the field at the line of scrimmage as well, rather than in the deeper and in the intermediate part of the field, maybe perhaps because of the other talent on the field, but also because of his I don't want to say poor, but maybe diminished route running. I think that it's now Kittle kind of filling in that role of being the safety blanket a little more, and him getting the targets as well.
Yeah, no, it could be all those things. I think, without Deebo Samuel, they'll go somewhere else, so that opens it up a little bit more. So that could be playing a little bit of a factor. And I agree with you. I do see Deebo Samuel being more utilized more as a screen game guy, those types of things. We haven't really seen him being given those, even over the middle, those 15-yard dig routes that he used to run.
That's the
those
interesting part.
Yeah, not having those. That's the I think probably changes is in that area.
Mm-hmm. No, agreed. Like the crossing routes, the intermediate routes, where route running might not necessarily be as important, but it's routes that Deebo Samuel flourished on last year, and so that might be certainly that part has diminished probably due to the emergence of Brandon Ayuk, obviously the talent that they have in the skill position room. But without Deebo Samuel this past few weeks, not only has Kittle seen an increase, last week we saw the impact of Ray McLeod, who essentially played the Deebo Samuel role in his minimal offensive snaps. He had the Deebo Samuel level handoff where he was able to accelerate for a 71-yard touchdown. Then he also had a screenplay, his lone target of the game, which was an errant throw from Purdy. Do you anticipate him also being in a similar role as he was last week, or do you think that that's more week-to-week fluctuation?
Who's that again? I'm sorry.
Ray McLeod.
He's gonna be the same guy, right? He's the Debo Light of the offense. They don't give him quite as many carries in the run game as what they gave Samuel. They don't give him quite as many attempts as far as targets either. But he's gonna get the end arounds, the sweeps, those types of things like we saw from Deebo Samuel. He's gonna get a few of those routes as well. So I would expect to see that continue with him.
Yeah, I think that McLeod has. Yeah, he's done fine in his limited role. Obviously known for his special team ability this year. He has kind of emerged onto the scene, a Pro Bowl alternate in that, and so he will see what role he gets this weekend. But I think, yeah, McLeod, he's had that role in a minimalistic kind of viewpoint, but also those targets have been shared amongst the remainder of the 49er receivers, specifically like George Kittle. But moving forward, 49ers Raiders this weekend. I saw some interesting comments, not only from Purdy, but also from Shanahan and D'Amico Ryans, praising the Raiders team. Purdy obviously speaking to Max Crosby, Shanahan saying he's the second best defender in the league behind Nick Bosa this year, and then D'Amico Ryan saying that this team can be dangerous with the pass catchers that they have and the composition of the team. Are the 49ers overlooking the Raiders? Kind of talk to me through this. What are the concerns you may have, or is this kind of just talk?
No, I think overlooking the Raiders should be a concern, but I think last night with the Cowboys being as close as it was against a team in Tennessee, that game shouldn't have been close when you consider their records and where the
Right.
Cowboys are compared to Tennessee and the number of guys that Tennessee had out last night. That game shouldn't have been anywhere near as close as it was at one point. I think it was a 3 or 4 point game at one point in time in the second half. So it could definitely be a close game, I think. And so are they overlooking them? I mean, that's a tough one to really point to, but there's some good players that are still there for the Raiders, and I think in some ways they're lucky Derek Carr isn't playing. It helps them out, I think.
Yeah, no.
Maybe.
I think that that's good, though. Not overlooking them, but understanding what they have on the field. I think they are depleted right now. No Derek Carr likely will be a step down at quarterback. I mean, nobody has really seen Jarrett Stidham all year. Didn't necessarily look good in his first NFL stint with the New England Patriots. Obviously, no Denzel Perryman, like you mentioned, as well as Chandler Jones, two key defenders, at least as of late. And so I don't think the 49ers are overlooking the Raiders. I think their roster is miles better. I also think they're playing better football right now and are well coached, better coached than the Raiders. But the NFL, we've seen this year, week to week league, anybody can lose to anybody. With that said, I think the 49ers win this one. And I said 31-10 was my score prediction.
Yeah, I mean, when you're looking to it, the 49ers should win this game. I think the biggest concern is, as you kind of said here, overlooking the Raiders. You look at Josh Jacobs, and this is the guy who's he's been tearing it up this season. I think he's I can't remember exactly what the numbers are.
He's
over 50,
well over 1,000.
Yeah, well, the number for the 49ers is that they have not allowed an opposing running back to gain over 59 yards on them this season. Josh Jacobs has done that in 12 of 15 games this year. So they're going up against the guy who's probably the best back that they're going to face. And, not having Derek Carr in some ways, like I said, maybe allows them to take a little bit more of a focus on Jacobs. But the other piece here, too, is Derek Carr has been the reason why the Raiders have been turning the ball over for the last 5 weeks. The Raiders have turned the ball over 10 times in the last 5 games. 9 of those have been from Derek Carr. The Raiders have only fumbled the ball 3 times all season. So you take Derek Carr out of this lineup, and the the Raiders just don't turn the ball over very often, and the 49ers have been feasting on turnovers. The game, again, the Raiders aren't the Washington Commanders by any stretch of the imagination, but the reason that game got out of hand last week was because of what the 49ers defense was doing in terms of the field position they gave the offense. After they made the score 14-7, their next 5 scores came from
beneficial field position.
Yeah, well, 4 of the 5 came from inside the Commanders' 35 as far as their starting field position, the 34, and it was all deep in the territory there. And so, if the Raiders don't turn the ball over and force the 49ers to go down the field, that's where you don't get to like a 27 or 30 point game That's where in general, usually, right, unless there's some big plays there, but usually if teams having to go up and down the field, unless they're extremely consistent, they're not going to get to that number.
Yeah, no, agreed here for sure. And so that's why it'll be an interesting game. The Raiders defense hasn't necessarily like performed well, so good way for Purdy to get more reps. Good way for Purdy to see what works once again with his skill set and his group of receivers. But flipping it over to the defensive side of the ball, Nick Bosa, obviously, Defensive Player of the Year candidate, potentially Defensive Player of the Year winner. But let's shy away from Nick Bosa for just a minute and talk about what I call the help. Now, the help consisting of guys like Arik Armstead, Charles Omenihu, Jordan Willis this past game, but there's a ton of players in that group have performed fairly well this year. Can you kind of break down what you've seen from the remainder of the 49ers players opposite of Nick Bosa and why this group has been so elite, both against the run and in the passing game?
It's just a really solid group all around. We went into this season with the expectation that the 49ers had the best roster in the NFL, minus the quarter. That's not something you and I just came up with. That's something that a lot of people that follow the NFL were saying, that this was an extremely talented team. The only question mark was what was going to happen at quarterback, because nobody knew for sure what they had there with Trey Lance. They've gone out and they're showing that week in and week out, and especially on the defensive side, it doesn't matter who it is. Like for example, on Sunday against Washington, they couple quick 3-and-outs, but then Washington puts a nice drive together, gets all the way down to the 49ers 1-yard line. And then at the one, a guy named T.Y. McGill, who wasn't a member of the 49ers at the start of the year, and along with Akeem Spence, who was a guy that was called up off the practice squad, they're your interior defensive tackles on 3rd and goal. And they get penetration into the backfield, which forces Brian Robinson to bounce it to the left outside and allows Dre Greenlaw to come up and make the tackle and drop him at the 1-yard line. And then you come back the next play, and it's Javon Kinlaw eating up a double team, McGill taking out the last blocker there, and nobody's left to block Fred Warner, who comes across and drops Robinson at the 1 to seal it. It's all throughout this team. Arik Armstead, you mentioned his name. He comes up big on the quarterback sneak. He's one of the guys that makes that stop along the line of scrimmage on the quarterback sneak to give the 49ers the ball at the 34. Then in the I believe it was the 4th quarter, he comes out and puts pressure on Taylor Heineke, leading to an interception from Jimmy Ward. And that's not the first time we've seen that. We saw that from him in the game against Miami as well. He puts pressure on Tua in that game, leading to a Ward interception. So, it's all along. Samson Ebukam, he's already at his career high, 4.5. If he can get a half of a sack at least this week, he has a career high. So it's Charles Omenihu just makes plays. He's a really solid guy who can play with the starters, or a solid guy off the bench. He was right there next to Armstead on that quarterback sneak, shutting that down. So you just kind of go through. I mean, you just keep talking about the names. Jordan Willis with he's right. Nick Bosa gets the sack fumble, but Jordan Willis is right there on Heineke as well, which is why he's able to grab the ball of the year for the fumble recovery. So it just goes on and on. You look at the 49ers defensive line, that defensive front, and the defensive front is what makes this whole defense go. And that's shouldn't be a surprise, because John Lynch and Kyle Shanahan have not tried to make it a secret that they believe that the front makes everything else around it better.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very accurate analysis. I mean, when you talk about the defensive line, you've got guys like Michael Dwumfor. The team just called up. They called up. He played this week, and he had a positive impact in this game. They bring in whoever, and they're able to mold this defense and whoever plays in it into a very high level defense. T.Y. McGill was a free agent signing just a couple of weeks ago, and now he's an impact player for this team along the defensive line and the interior. It's just phenomenal the way that different players are able to step up and play. It's just very, very it's very, very nice to see the way that this defense plays. When you go back to 2019, it was amazing to have the superstars, the 4 players that could line up consistently in D Ford, Nick Bosa, DeForest Buckner, Arik Armstead. But we've transformed this defensive line now is a group of not just four guys, but eight, nine guys who can all have their number called and make a positive impact on this team. And then when we get to the higher players, right, the Charles Omenahues, the Ark Armsteads, the Samson Ebukams, Omenahue is a top 10 guy in terms of pass rush win rate this year in the entire NFL. He's been that dominant in gaining pressures. He had another 5 pressure game this week. He's been that dominant overall. It's great to see. Obviously, he's a situational guy, mainly a pass rusher, but a guy like that with the versatility and the ability to play not only with the front but with the backups as well is important. Samson Ebukam, like you said, a stout run defender already, but also a solid pass rusher. I think a pass rush win rate of nearly 16%, which is pretty good in the top 60. And so you got some key rotational players there, and then Ark Armstead, a guy who can eat multiple defenders, be a run stopper, but also move guys in the passing game. Just the perfect complement to Nick Bosa on the interior. 7 pressure game. He's a guy who always is the guy. He's just a guy who can make plays whenever his number is called upon. But the one guy we haven't spoke about yet, the guy that obviously has been coming back from injury, saw some snaps last week, made some plays even last week, Javon Kinlaw. What was your thoughts on him last week, and what do you expect from him this upcoming week?
What are you talking about, Rohan? I just said how good he was on the. I'm joking with you,
Yeah,
but
but I
he
want to
made that.
give some more.
I know. No, he had the one big play. I'm joking with you. I just had to give you a hard time. No, but he had the really nice play on fourth down. I thought that was a really good one. I
Mhm.
think he got a tackle earlier on in the game as well. He played 16 snaps. I think that's about the number that you would expect to see with him this week again. He's not a guy that I would look that's going to be a down in every down kind of guy. I think right now he is a rotational piece. That can be the
Right.
first guy on the field, but as part of a rotation, you don't want to have him playing too much, but allow him to get after it as hard as he can for 15 to 20 snaps a game. I think that's how you save his knee and really make the best use of it. And then who knows what happens going into next year.
I think Javon Kinlaw, I mean, when he's on the field, I don't think that you can deny that Javon Kinlaw has an impact on the game. Javon Kinlaw is a special player. It's just the injuries have always costed him throughout the entirety of his career. He still hasn't had a regular NFL offseason. And so he did make plays this past week. Like you said, the fourth down play was big. 16 snaps, 20 snaps, I think that that's valuable for Javon Kinlaw. Getting him to play 25%, 30% of the defensive snaps, I think that that should be a nice goal for Kinlaw because of the way that you can rotate these defensive linemen on the interior, especially when you got guys like Kevin Givens back and Kerry Hyder at full health. I think that that's going to be valuable and help Javon Kinlaw not only grow, but also play and maximize his ability in the snaps that he's getting. So expect to see Javon Kinlaw play similar to what he did last week. Solid performance. Hope that he can continue it without any setbacks going into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think it's the best way. They're in the best spot for it. And uh, yeah, again, Kinlaw, along with the rest of that interior defensive line rotation, gives the 40 everything that they have there. Even Kerry Hyder, who should be back, might be able to play this week, but if not, he's going to be there in the playoffs. This just Kinlaw as a part of a large rotation is such a good piece for the 49ers.
Yeah, no, definitely. I see two more people in the chat, John V, and I see as well Kali Young. Thank you both for tuning in to the show. Appreciate you guys. Let's talk running backs. So last week we saw Ty Davis Price get 9 carries for 30 yards. Mason, who came in with a hamstring, seemed to have had some injury on a kickoff return. I believe the initial one did not get a running back or a snap at running back. What do you expect this week out of the running back room? Do you think Mason goes back into the fold? Do you think, as a result, does Ty Davis Price drop, or do you see a three back committee this week?
I think the 49ers are really built to have it be a two-man show in terms of the backs. It's going to be Christian McCaffrey and it's going to be either Ty Davis Price or Jordan Mason. They're at their best if it's Jordan. They're better with Jordan Mason than Ty Davis Price being that second back, but it's probably going to be. I would expect to see probably a little bit more of Ty Davis Price than Jordan Mason just because of the injury. Although he's off of the injury report now and everything. Keep giving some of those carries to Davis Price and let Mason rest up, make sure he's fully ready to go. I know he was still covering special teams after the knee injury early on, but I think we'll probably see a little bit more of Ty Davis Price, though. I'm not sold on him still.
Yeah, I think I agree. Mason is definitely the better back for the offense at the moment. Don't know what the rotation will be like. I think the 49ers do want a two-back rotation. We've seen that on multiple accords or this entire year. I think that that's what they want, and I think Mason's the guy until Mitchell comes back. But if the injury continues to linger, I don't think there's uh I don't think there's any harm in setting him this week against the Raiders and letting him get that extra week of rest for Week 18. So would not mind if he plays primarily special teams once again. I think that he would be the third back elevated to play primarily special teams. But if he's injured, go with Davis Price. If he's healthy, you go with Jordan Mason. So it depends on how he is feeling on game day, be it 100% or not.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. And it's going to be really interesting to see
Yeah,
what happens really quick too, since we're talking about running backs. Elijah
go for
Mitchell.
it.
There was good news on him today as well. He's going to be back on the field next week. They would have activated him today. He would have been on the field if he wasn't sick. So that's another positive. Is Elijah Mitchell coming back? That 1-2 punch of Elijah Mitchell
Yeah.
and Christian McCaffrey is going to be, I think, very good once they get to that point in the playoffs where they're able to utilize both those guys. Uh, and with Mitchell, we saw what happens with him. He came back his first game back, and Kyle Shanahan said, "Okay, go out there, big boy, and run it 18 times for me."
Exactly.
We're not even going to try to ease you into this thing. Just go out there, run it. So I think the Friars are in a really good spot. They have a good stable of backs, and we're seeing them with a good stable of quarterbacks as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. Now, sticking with the offense in the running game, guy who gets a lot of hate, Mike McGlinchey. I know you're a realist. You call it how you see it. So I want to get your take on it this entire season and really as of late. Thoughts on Mike McGlinchey, and then we'll get to potentially past 2022 and whether the 49ers should retain him.
Well, I've been pretty outspoken on my thoughts on McGlinchey. I think that a lot of what's being said about him is a bunch of garbage. The guy's one of the better right tackles in the NFL. The only reason that I think you knock Mike McGlinchey is because he was the ninth pick in the draft. But if you take that out of the equation and just look at what he's doing at right tackle, he's one of the better ones in the NFL. And he hurt him last week with a couple of red zone snaps that he jumped off on. And, he had a holding penalty up in Seattle that was it was the right call, but they also didn't call it a couple other times in the game. So,
Mm-hmm.
Overall, his overall body work is way better than the majority of the Foreigner fans on Twitter want you to believe.
Yeah, I mean, Mike McGlinchey is a story of two pieces. When you look at him with pure evaluation to his draft status, you're always going to look at him at a negative capacity because Mike McGlinchey, let's be honest, is not a top to nine player in his class. Probably should. It's not that he probably shouldn't be drafted at the ninth overall pick, but he hasn't lived up to that expectation at the moment. But if you look at Mike McGlinchey as a player in the NFL, you can't deny that Mike McGlinchey is a solid player. That's unfortunate. Yes. Has he had mental lapses? Has he had these issues that are more personified because of the situation in which they come in? Yes. But Mike McGlinchey overall has been a solid player. I think he's improved in pass protection as well, which has been an important part. I think you could even say that he's improved in pass protection this year, and his run blocking has maybe taken a step back. As of late, it's been pretty good, though. I think that he's probably remained the same in that facet overall. But McGlinchey, when you talk about it, you also have to understand how is the right tackle position in the NFL. Now, left tackle is one of the more talented positions, at least at the top. But McGlinchey, in terms of right tackles, is a very serviceable right tackle, and I think that there's a premium for that. I think teams want a serviceable right tackle, and you also don't see right tackles at his age, 28 years old, entering the age 29 season, hitting free agency at the caliber that Mike McGlinchey plays, which is why I want to ask you, do you think the 49ers retain Mike McGlinchey in the offseason? What's your thoughts on that?
That's going to be a tough call because, right now this season, actually what they're getting, what they're paying Mike McGlinchey is it's somewhat of a bargain. I know he's on the higher end at 10.88 mil, but it's a little bit, I think, on the better side of for what the production again that they're getting there. Using the 50-year option kind of pigeonholes them into that number. They might have been better off extending them to a longer term deal in the offseason prior to it, where they could have played around with his cap numbers. But Does he come back? I think there's a good chance that he gets Laken Tomlinson off of this team. You know what I mean by that is a guy who just gets paid way
Right.
too
A
much
guy who
money.
just gets priced out of the 49ers range.
Yeah, but the 49ers also, they tend to, if you look at the way they do their kind of structure their numbers, they like to pay tackles. They don't necessarily want to pay the interior. So maybe you give if you give McGlinchey another 4-year deal, whatever the number is, and with the cap situation going up in terms of the cap number with the new TV deal and all that stuff, maybe you can work it out so you can keep him on board for 3 or 4 more years.
Yeah, I think McGlinchey probably fits in the Jack Conklin range. I'd expect. Conklin got a 4-year, $60 million deal, maybe a smidge under Conklin. I think he's over Rob Havenstein, who's had a down year. Havenstein earned 11.5 a year, which would say, like you said, Jack, probably place his current contract at 10.88 million as a bargain. We'll see how many years that contract will be. Obviously, McGlinchey entering that age, I believe, 28 season. 29 season, I think, is what McGlinchey is about to enter. So we'll see how the contract goes, but 49ers do like to pay tackles. They also did show propensity for trying to get younger last year, so that could play a factor into it in terms of how they want to structure their contract. But McGlinchey is going to be very interesting. I think he's going to get some offers in the offseason for sure, given given his age, given his talent, and given that some teams want to be run first, seeing how it's draining opposing teams with the physicality. So it'll be an interesting situation to monitor. I could very well see a team pricing the 49ers out of the range for McGlinchey, but would not be surprised if McGlinchey is retained. I think the 49ers would have interest in bringing him back.
4 for 60 is not a deal that's overwhelming. I think for the 49ers, 4 for 60, 4 for 64, somewhere in that ballpark. I think that would make sense for him. You can build that up to everybody looks at the number and it's a big deal, but then you start to look at the cap hits and they can punch numbers around and do all kinds of different things with the guarantees and what all that kind of money looks like. So, they can make it. Here's the way it works in the NFL. If you want a player, you keep them. If you don't want a player, you don't keep them. There's ways around, and that's just at the end of the day that we'll know if they want them or not by whether or not they re-sign them.
Jack with the business 101. Keep them, don't keep them. That's how it is.
Well, it's because you can get it done. If you like the player enough, you'll figure a way to make it happen because there's a lot of creativity that can take place.
Yeah. All right. But sticking with the offense, one thing that struggled this week, red zone offense. 49ers, like you said, had several possessions inside that Commanders 35-yard line. Got away with only field goals in some of them. Do you attribute this red zone offense issue to any certain problem? Or do you think this was an outlier? What's kind of your thoughts on this heading into the playoffs?
I'd have to look at it a little bit closer in terms of the Washington game. I believe that they were up by a couple of scores most of the way when they were not scoring, right? So you look at it, they were up by 2 scores. They were up by 2 scores. Then that's when they kicked the field goal, right? They were up by a score, kicked the field goal, went up 2 scores, then went up by 13. So I don't know. It's when you look at the Flyers offense, if you want to point to one area that would cause them to struggle in the red zone more than anything, I think it's the run blocking up front. They don't push people around. And once you get into the red zone and defenses play a little bit tighter in there, it makes it a little bit harder to get angles on guys because of the way that they align down in there, especially in the deep red zone and the 5 on the end. And the 49ers just don't push people off the ball very well. The majority of the time when you see them blow guys off, it's because it's a down block or something like that. It's getting an angle on a guy that allows them to drive him out with another puller behind. That's one of the reasons why they run that counter so much. If you watch them, they run counter a lot, and it's because it allows them to get angles with pulling guys. Right. And when you can't move people to the line of scrimmage, that's how you would do it. It's one of the reasons why they run the ball so well in the middle of the field is because they are really good as a zone blocking team, because in zone blocking, you're not working man on. You're basically working one man over. And again, it's an angle thing, and you're forcing the defense to start to move. And then once that defender moves, you use his leverage against them, and you let the running back choose where he's going to go. But it's really hard to run zone inside the 5-yard line just because the way the defense is aligned against you. So if I
Mhm.
was going to point to one thing, I think it's their inability to and push people off the ball at the line of scrimmage.
Yeah, and I know we've talked about this problem before. That's been a problem when they've tried to run that power gap scheme. It is trying to push at the line of scrimmage, and maybe it is due to personnel at times because Jordan Mason does make a difference more than Christian McCaffrey when trying to get those extra yards in between the tackles. But still, the inability to push at the line of scrimmage does make a difference, especially in the red zone when you're going to have teams selling out against the run, teams with stacked boxes where you need to have good execution along your offensive line and in your running game to have successful plays. But yeah, this is an issue where the 49ers will need to find adjustments in the playoffs because points are points. You need those 7 points at times, and when you have your defense capitalizing several times on those type of possessions, you're going to want to be able to maximize the amount of points that you can score when given the opportunities because you don't, especially when you know that you're going to face a top level defense in the playoffs. The Cowboys have strong defensive lines, which is going to be hard to again push against them. The Vikings have a good defensive line. The Eagles have one of the best, if not the best, apart from the 49ers defensive line in the NFL. You're going to face strong defensive lines. You're going to need some sort of adjustment in this area.
Yeah, and this isn't again. And now we haven't talked about this, but I don't know if I'd say this is just red zone. We're talking about a short yardage offense now. This is an
Mhm.
area where having Brock Purdy as your quarterback hurts you. Jimmy Garoppolo and Trey Lance are much better at quarterback sneaks than Brock Purdy. We've seen Brock Purdy get stuffed a number of times
Right.
on these quarterback sneaks. He just doesn't have he just doesn't push the pile quite the same as Jimmy Garoppolo or Trey Lance do. And so you're seeing the Flyers have to be a little bit more creative in what they do. In those short yard situations, you just can't line up and have the quarterback push forward for 4 or 5 yards. So I think that's something to keep an eye on as well.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely, definitely. Real quick, do want to give a shout out to Mariah for just tuning in. Thank you for obviously coming on. We talked about some concerns. Red zone offense one. You got any other concerns with the 49ers roster or with the 49ers team in general heading into the playoffs?
I think the only other real spot to look at and be concerned about possibly with the Flyers is their secondary, especially, they're good with Charvarius Ward and Yamato Lenore and that group, right? They're not bad back there. But the problem, as we saw on Sunday, is if Charvarius Ward goes down, this team is not good. Samuel Womack, as soon as he went off the field, they just went right down the field on him and scored. Samuel Womack giving up a 51-yard, grab uh, and so on. So they need to they need Charvarius Ward to stay healthy, and beyond that, they're kind of they have what they have in terms of their secondary players. Uh, but if there is one concern that you look at on the Flyers defense, it is their secondary, and that's one of the reasons why. When you look at the potential matchups moving into the playoffs, the one that concerns me for the first round, as crazy as it might sound, would be Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers.
Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers. That's an interesting matchup because that's not very, but that is realistic in the week one matchup. And I think that it's a valid concern. I wrote a concerns article last week or this past week. That was one of them. If Charvarius Ward goes down, we've seen it now on multiple occasions when Ward has gone down that the 49ers have struggled in the secondary when another player comes in. Ward has exited the game, I believe, 3 or 4 times this year, and he's never missed a game. That's the strong part about Charvarius Ward, but he has exited games for a couple of snaps in each of them, and it's clear what the directive is when Ward exits the game. It's thrown in the direction of whoever just replaced him. The Commanders did it this past week with Samuel Womack, and it wasn't necessarily Womack's fault the entire way. Yeah, he got beat. He recovered well, but Deshaun Gibson did not help on that play. Instead, overcommitted when Tano Hufunga was there playing cover two. And so, the part of Ward, you're not only missing his play. I said this week. You're not only missing the play of Ward, you're also missing the communication level that Ward and the starting level defense has when Ward exit the field. This was the first week where we really saw in a while the 49ers defense give up explosives via the air. The 49ers defense had been doing well in limiting explosives. They had been giving up coverage busts, but the Commanders seemed like they were getting these explosive plays via the air a good amount. And so the safeties are going to have to do a good job of limiting these explosive plays going forward, especially in the playoffs against prolific offenses, because that's where one play can really change the whole directive of the game.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's that's where you're worried about this team, and I think I had put that out there as well on the defensive side. If you're looking at areas to worry about, it was in my mailbag thing. I think it was asked about it. If you're going to look at one area on the 49ers, it's the secondary. Everywhere else, they're stalled. That defensive front, like we've already talked about it. That linebacker group is outstanding. The offense, on the offensive side, you worry about Brock Purdy throwing picks in the playoffs, but other than that, it's the secondary. And so they don't have, I said a few minutes ago, they don't have anywhere to go. They're stuck with what they have. They do have Jack Rabbit, Janoris Jenkins. What are they going to do? I mean, he could come off the bench and be a backup, but they've only activated him once so far, which I think is something they're waiting to do more in the postseason.
Yeah, no, definitely. But one positive of the secondary, especially in the last probably 5 or 6 weeks, Jimmy Ward, who initially had struggled in the slot, didn't look as good when he was facing the injuries, especially with that club. Now has really started to go back to the level of play that we've seen from Jimmy Ward when he's played in the slot in the 200 snaps in the years prior, even potentially at a better level in his contract year. What have you seen from him? And do you think what do you think about his situation in the offseason as well?
I look at the numbers for Jimmy Ward, what he's done over these since he came back. He struggled the first game back. I know his first game back was Carolina, but he only played one snap in that game.
Yeah.
So really, you look at Jimmy Ward. His first game back was Kansas City. So, Kansas City's kind of has a few weapons on that side of the ball. Your first game back after dealing with a hamstring, and you're playing against the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes. I think along with Travis Ward dealing with hamstring injuries in that game, and Nick Bosa coming back from an injury in that game, I think you can give him a little bit of a break there. I didn't give him a break in the beginning, but I think you can. And things started turning around for him really in the second half of the game against the Rams. He was struggled in the first half against the Rams. They actually pulled him off the field for a play or two, and from that point on, he's played lights out. He's given up a passer rating of, I think, 66.6. I think is the number, 66.7, I think, whatever it is. He has a career high 3 interceptions. His numbers, when you compare to what the 49ers have got from the slot cornerback position over the last few years, are I think, better than what K'Wan Williams posted for them. And he's just, the thing with Jimmy Ward that makes him so good and so valuable, because he is covering better, is his ability to fill in the run game. It was the one thing that we were when we go back to our conversations. You probably go back to one of our shows together back during training camp, and we were talking about who's going to play in the slot. And the question was, well, this guy looks really good in coverage, but can he fill in the run? Well, that's what Jimmy Ward has done a tremendous job of that. And like you already said, all the other guys around him, you got all those guys up front, and they're all helping him out too. And I'm really happy for him that he's been able to get 3 interceptions this year, which is a career high. And he's going to get paid this offseason as a result of it, I think.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Jimmy Ward, I'm very happy that he's been able to do what he's been able to do recently. Struggled at first. I think it was, the Kansas City game, like you said, struggled at first, was not a great game for Jimmy Ward. But the last few weeks, Ward has been locked down in coverage. Specifically, I think his best game was the Tampa Bay game. Really shut down those receivers in the slot. Ward has done what he's done in the past year. And in 2021, Ward was one of the best run defending safeties in the NFL. Didn't miss a tackle on 77 opportunities. He's always physical, but also played great coverage. Now he's going back to that level of play and is being more involved because he's not that overhang safety anymore. He's right in the middle of the action in the nickel. He's been able to fit the run well. He's got the experience, and he's played good coverage overall. That's been beneficial for the 49ers. And in a way, we've seen what Ward did at safety in 2021. We've now seen what Ward can do at nickel in 2022. He's shown that he can play two positions at a very high level. I think that benefits him in the offseason.
Yeah, I think the thing when you look at it with Jimmy Ward, is he's given up a high number of completions. He's giving up 71% of the time they throw at him. They're completing the ball, but they're not getting very much. They've only averaged 7.8 yards. So when you do throw it towards Jimmy Ward, you're usually not picking up chunks. It's usually in short bits. And that's where this 49ers defense is really good, is they do not give up the big play. They force you to make play after play after play and drive your way down the field. And then they're going to take their chances on you in the red zone. If you can get down in there, they feel good about their ability to stop you. And we've seen them do it a number of times in the going back to the New Orleans game with these goal line stands and all those kind of things. And Ward's been solid. And I think that I don't mind pointing to what he's doing. And I think again, I said it earlier, if you're gonna point to Jimmy Ward to how good he's playing, you also need to point to Eric Armstead because without Eric Armstead, Jimmy Ward doesn't have two interceptions. Two of those interceptions are coming from him playing zone defense, pressure getting placed on the quarterback, and the ball getting thrown to him, and him breaking on the ball out of zone coverage. And it's a good play on both ends, but it's a really good example of how one guy helps the other guy. And it's the same thing along the defensive line with Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa and all these other defensive tackles and defensive linemen that are doing so well.
Yeah, and I think the point that you bring up of the 49ers being able to limit offenses to these short chunks, that's super important. Apart from this last game, I hadn't really seen that, and that's been a big reason why they're able to do what they do without allowing explosive plays that forces opposing offenses to travel more to get to the field, requiring more plays. You expect the pass rush to get there on one of those second or third downs. That sets up a longer play. And so it's just even tougher for opposing offenses. That's why sometimes I won't pay attention to the yards. Receivers can have 100 yards, but are they really making as big of an impact to the game with those 100 yards as they would in a different game? No, because the 49ers are limiting these guys to shorter chunks, forcing opposing offenses to really execute at a high level for them to score these touchdowns. That's why the shutout streak happened. That's why they were playing at such a high level.
Well, they're giving up the fewest yards per play in the NFL. I just looked it up while you're talking. 4.8 yards per play. They're tied with the Eagles and with the Jets in that category. And they've turned the ball over 15 times during this 8-game win streak, meaning they've forced 15 turnovers during that time. So there's just so much that they do on that side of the ball. And you look at the quarterbacks that they go up against, and they struggle when you get them down into those tight areas. Patrick Mahomes is the only guy. Again, this is why I say I like their chances. They don't face Patrick Mahomes until the Super Bowl. Tell me if there's a quarterback in the NFC that gives you the skill set of a Patrick Mahomes. I don't think so.
It's pretty hard. I mean, you can see the Pro Bowl quarterbacks this year. It's pretty darn tough.
Yeah, and the only guy that maybe you get worried about is Jalen Hurts, maybe.
Yeah.
Because of his ability to run the ball and their ability to run the ball and be physical in the run game in Philadelphia. That's a little bit of a different story for another time. Who knows? Maybe the 49ers get lucky and they don't even have to worry about playing Philadelphia. Maybe Philadelphia just tanks the games at home, and the 49ers sit at home, and Philadelphia comes out to here, and you have a different ball game in the championship game. Because I really think that's where this is going. I think it's the 49ers and somebody else, are the two are going to play in this NFC championship game. And the only way that doesn't happen is if the quarterback position falls apart over the next 5 weeks.
Yeah, no, I agree. And that's why it's a little bit of a perk to play in the NFC, because you're not going to have to run through Justin Herbert or Joe Burrow or Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. You face one of them. And if you do, you made the Super Bowl, and that's where you face them. That's the big benefit of playing in this conference this year, which is why the AFC playoffs are going to be pretty fun. But yeah, good point there.
Thank you.
But hey, Jack, I appreciate your time. I think that's a good place to end today's show. For those of you guys that were able to tune into the chat, I appreciate all of you as well. Thank you guys so much for tuning in and taking your time. For everybody in the chat, have a happy holidays. Any last thoughts, Jack?
No, I agree with you. Everybody, make sure you have a lot of fun. New Year's Eve coming up on Saturday night. Enjoy it. Have a good time. Be safe out there with whatever you're doing. And just, take it easy. Make sure you're with your friends and your loved ones. Make good choices. And look forward to talking to you guys all on Sunday as the Niners get ready to take on the Raiders in Vegas on Sunday afternoon.
Great words from Grandpa Jack to end today's show. Thank you guys so much. Nah, I'm kidding. But thank you guys so much. We'll see you guys next time.
Take care.